According to all known laws of aviation, there is no way a bee should be able to fly. Its wings are too small to get its fat little body off the ground. The bee, of course, flies anyway, because bees don't care what humans think is impossible. I wrote that. I've been torn on whether or not to talk about this. I didn't want to contribute to the algorithm fodder, and don't get me wrong, I don't think that that's what everyone who talked about this was doing. I just know how YouTube works. We all know how YouTube works. That's why this whole mess exists in the first place. This platform rewards quantity over quality because its ultimate goal is to just keep you inundated with content so that you stay here watching to help generate that sweet, sweet ad revenue. It's all about money. It's always about money, and we're gonna get into that. It's obviously this is a video about James Somerton, but if you are here for a rehashing of details or new tea, you are going to be disappointed. This is a reflection on social phenomena and an exploration of feelings because that is what I do. Really, it was his decision to come back and apologize that kind of clinched it for me. I need to say some stuff. More like an apology video. Am I right? I'm mad. Again, I keep making angry videos, but yeah, when it comes to James Somerton, I am a queer person who is pissed off. That's my angle. That's where I'm approaching from. Let's get one thing clear from the start. I feel kind of bad for James Somerton. I do. I feel bad for James Somerton. And I'm irritated that I know just me saying that would likely enable the thinking that he has towards himself that lets him grift and avoid accountability in the first place. So let me be extremely clear. I think James Somerton is dishonest, manipulative, and selfish. That he knowingly exploited his supporters and countless queer artists, and that he is facing the consequences of his own actions. I don't feel bad for him because he got caught and his YouTube career is in the tank. That is how it should be. And quite frankly, I think attempting to make a comeback to video creation and Patreon is unbelievably inappropriate and demonstrates that he's sorry he got caught, not sorry that he plagiarized and hurt people he was claiming to represent. I simply feel bad for anyone who is facing the contempt of over 1 million people, even when that contempt is deserved. Our finite little monkey brains haven't really evolved to process mass visibility, let alone mass contempt. More specific to James, I can't even imagine the depth of insecurity that would lead someone to take those kinds of actions. And before anyone reads into that, I do think money became the motivator eventually. I think that money was always at least partially a motivator, but I think that there was more that started him off on this path. And I can only speculate. I can only speculate on that. I'm not a mental health expert. I considered referencing some studies on loneliness and social media use and phrases that I'm not even going to say out loud because in this context, talking about a specific person, I think it would be incredibly irresponsible to do that. I think there is such a scourge of armchair psych diagnoses that take place on this platform that even mentioning certain words is a problem. So like I said, I need to stress that what I am doing here is speculating based on things that James said and shared in his own videos. That's it. By James's own admission, he struggled a lot with self-image and self-esteem, and I can't help but wonder how much this played into his apparent need to feel important and avoid criticism. Evidently, no matter how much it hurt the community that he claimed to be representing. One his own stolen scripts detailed the exploitation and erasure of. And see, this is where my compassion starts to fizzle, because we all have insecurities. But not all of us use them to deflect criticism when we're called out on hurting other people. And especially not when we're called out on grifting people out of thousands of dollars while promising them representation and giving them reinforcement of bigotry instead. Shout out to women, femmes, and aces of all genders. Because oof. So, since James used the queer community for money and influence, I'm going to go ahead and use him for talking points. Specifically talking points about leftism, how it's exploited by some people, and what that looks like. If you are not politically left, you are welcome to stick around, but keep in mind that this isn't really for you. This assumes some basic understanding about systems of oppression, intersectionality, and queer theory, so if just hearing those terms made you feel like your soul was going to drop out your butthole, you might want to sit this one out. The phrase leftist is kind of nebulous, so let me be a little bit more clear. I'm talking about collectivism. I'm talking about political interests and social values that regard human beings as all part of the same collective. A framework wherein differences are key details of the human mosaic, and they all work alongside one another to create a much bigger picture. James tried to position himself as the artist behind a collective masterpiece. Queer people have, since the dawn of humanity, been contributing our colors across time periods and cultures. We have persevered, we have thrived in spite of efforts to crush us, and we have not only created art, we have defined it, smashing barriers on our paths to self-actualization that leave new routes open for everyone else. And far too often, we have had our contributions, stories, identities, and sometimes very existence completely erased. From well-known historical figures like Leonardo da Vinci, to pop culture icons like Kevin Conroy, to forgotten pioneers like Lucy Hicks Anderson. People whose very existence challenged the hegemonic status quo, and continues to do so, who were targeted for their queerness to the point that it often would have been erased from history entirely, if not for the other queer people who fought to preserve it. I needed to talk about what James did because of how hard it hit on that level. This isn't just a professional betrayal, it is a deeply, deeply cultural one, and it exemplifies how oppression often operates within oppressed groups. Just about every queer person who has engaged with our community or picked up a book knows about the long-running pattern of queer erasure. For queer people of color, particularly those who are Black and Indigenous, they face homophobia and transphobia that is compounded by racism. And this is often perpetuated by white queer people who let the struggles of the latter blind us to the power of the former, even using queer persecution as a deflection tactic when we are criticized for our abuses of that power. To me, James Somerton is someone who embodies white queerness in multiple ways. He is a cis gay man who struggles with his body image, and that is a challenging experience. Fatphobia and body dysmorphia are rampant in gay spaces, and that's pain. Most people experience harm under oppressive systems, even the people who benefit from them, and there is grief in those experiences. That grief needs to be unpacked. Part of the reason why is because unaddressed grief often leads to resentment, and resentment plus power is a perfect breeding ground for lateral violence. It's easier to punch across or down than it is to punch up. And if you have access to structural benefits, as white people do, there is an unspoken choice that you make as a person who is otherwise marginalized. Do you use your social privilege as an amplifier in challenging systems, or do you use your marginalization to deflect responsibility? By stealing from other queer writers, James Somerton was able to perform just enough understanding that he could more easily explain away his otherwise glaring ignorance, at least for other white allosexual people. By stealing from other queer writers, James was able to build an online brand out of progressive attitudes that he could then profit from. In this, James has provided an extremely clear example of what so many of us are talking about when we discuss white privilege, male privilege, and cis privilege. When we talk about proximity to power and how that position is used, he had a choice between letting his gay identity unite him with other queer people or accessing the power and privilege granted to him on the grounds of being a white, cis man. One who uses his queerness as an accessory in his own practice of exploitation. And I say this as a bisexual white guy, like you can see that background. I'm not vilifying white dudes who are into dudes just for existing. I'm criticizing the decision to fall back on the power that gives you rather than fall in with other people who are fighting for their liberation and visibility. Liberation and visibility that you could help with using your platform. Gah. James made a choice, and I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Claiming to give a voice to the historically voiceless while being yet another cog in the machine that silences them. It is not that he is worse than the outside systems that are oppressing queer people, it is that he should have known better. He did know better. That's a lot of what he talked about. And this gets to a weird side note that I don't know. If you're still here, I can only assume that you're as big of a social theory nerd as I am, but we all understand that leftism isn't an immutable characteristic, right? Like, we all get that it's something you do, not something you are. Leftism is created through values and actions. If you claim to value humanity without actions to back that up, it's just empty talk. And if you speak to values you don't actually hold so that you can make money, that's some next level shit, my dude. That's real messed up. I also feel like I'm screaming into the void here, but I'm begging people to understand that just because the left offers acceptance to marginalized identities, it does not mean that anyone who has that identity automatically aligns with those principles. That's not how that works. See, for example, the LGBT why I left the left grift, where somebody leans into the popular misunderstanding of their transness or gayness as inherently political to play token to the very people who politicize that identity in the first place. It reduces leftism to a label that you're born with, rather than a set of values you actually need to maintain and demonstrate. It dehumanizes our identities by politicizing them, and it cheapens our politics and our philosophies by reducing them to birthright. That very concept of like being born into a specific status, that is exactly one of the things that we are trying to get away from. I don't have a corkboard and I don't have any thread to like do all this stuff, but like I just need you to just like pretend that's what's happening here, because I need more people to get this. I need more people to understand that this isn't how it works. You don't just say the right things. You have to feel the right things. You have to mean it. You have to mean it. And I'm so tired of seeing people like James who don't mean it. They don't care. Reining it in, I'm not saying that I think James is en route to making a why I left the left comeback to making content. I genuinely hope James Somerton tries to make amends. And I can't say what that looks like, but I do know that it starts with shutting his mouth, opening his ears, and putting his full attention on the people that he hurt and stole from, both intellectually and financially. I didn't watch enough of his content to catch all the ways that he told on himself, but I did watch enough to notice the misogyny. I also watched enough to catch on to some I'm the center of the queer universe brain goblins. You know, this idea that cis gay white men are the original flavor of queer people. Kind of, parallels the idea that cis white straight men are just the original flavor of person, just like the base model human being and everybody else is derivative. This is obviously nonsense. And it's very important to understand this both in just simply interacting with other people and also in how we address prejudice. Somerton's willingness to plagiarize and erase anyone who exists further from this apparent original flavor idea that he seemed to operate from is a pretty damning indictment. It's giving not knowing where its giving comes from. And I know, James stole from plenty of cis gay white men as well. And they are victims of erasure and plagiarism too. So like that, yes, I get it. Ultimately, what this comes down to is that queer lefty creators, the ones who actually embody those principles, don't play the exploitation game. Those using leftism as a Trojan horse most certainly do. In addition to taking advantage of his largely queer audience, James's behavior reinforced some deeply problematic thinking about content creation, or in his case, content plagiarism. Namely that information and experiences are resources to be extracted and capitalized on, which could not be further from the truth. These things are self-sustaining and strengthened by being shared, and this is especially true for communities contending with erasure. By commodifying information and queer experiences, you separate them from their inherent value. By centering financial and social capital, you create competition within oppressed groups that should be cooperating. And this is not meant to imply that people should not be compensated for their work. We live under capitalism. People need money to survive. I get it. But the actual creators who are doing the work are the ones that should be compensated. And this is a cooperative effort. So if you are trying to isolate and control access to information, you have really missed the point. Call it putting your mouth where the money is. As YouTubers, we compete a fair amount with the algorithm, which, as we know, rewards quantity and not quality. We also compete with viewers' clicks and watch patterns, which tend to favor drama and morbid curiosity over being challenged with new information. But we are not in competition with each other. And anyone who acts like we are, and acts like, holding information like it's some kind of precious resource that you get to, distribute and make money off of, betrays the fact that they just don't understand what progressive movements are really about. And also that they don't know how YouTube works. As long as James thinks that he can just make a comeback, that he can apologize his way around the things he's done, he is reaffirming the fact that he just doesn't get it. But at the very least, I really, really hope that this serves as a lesson to the rest of us on what we look for in creators and how we consume information. And I say that because I know it's done that for me. If you are a regular viewer of my channel who comes here for the not drama and you are irritated with me, that's entirely fair. I get it. That's allowed. But I hope you still got something useful out of this. I hope that the discussion was worth it. Also, in all fairness, I don't know if James actually ever called himself a leftist or considered himself one, but he was definitely active in LeftTube, and that was his primary audience, and that was a particular demographic that he was catering to. I just said the same thing twice, but you get what I mean. He made videos that were specifically about systems of oppression. He had access to all of the information that should have made it clear to him that what he was doing was incredibly wrong. But he did it anyway. The pivotal issue here is that James Somerton doesn't appear to actually hold the values that he was speaking to. But I do. I believe that queer visibility, disseminating information, and social progress are shared efforts. I abhor gatekeeping, and I genuinely want people to diversify their viewing habits. So here are some smaller queer YouTube creators that have really inspired me, that I love watching, and that I think more people should pay attention to. JV, aka Red, Black, Golden, does media reviews and beautifully vulnerable explorations of identity. She approaches with a critical eye and a calming energy to get you thinking without feeling mentally taxed, which is a very delicate line to walk. Adam Fellows is an unbelievably talented and well-rounded creator. They're a writer, musician, actor, and puppeteer whose work you have almost definitely seen featured in other creators' videos. It is no secret that we love Erasure on this channel. Writing, editing, critical analysis, animation, Erasure does it all. I've talked before about what a good friend they've been to me, and her care and attention to detail are strengths that she brings to her friendships and content creation. Sarah, the fat culture critic, is not only an insightful creator, but a genuinely wonderful person. She's taught me a lot, both as a friend and in her video analyses of fat representation in media. Really, really excellent stuff. Ma Bluebird is a friend of the channel and fabulous creator. They give thoughtful, nuanced takes on queer topics and many other things, so you are really missing out if you don't already follow them. Please, please, please go do that. I've included my favorites from these creators and more in a playlist that you can find down in the description. I've also linked to a Tumblr post by DCMC Boxers, not just because I'm included in that list, though I do really appreciate it, but because it boosted creators I know and love and helped me discover new ones. So I hope it does the same for you. This is by no means an exhaustive list. I actually have a much, much larger project coming that is going to highlight just transmasculine creators, because we are a chronically underrepresented group of people. And it is happening. It's happening. Like, I'm writing it, I'm in the research hole, it is like, we're in fixation mode, it is happening, I promise. I'm not just doing that ADHD thing where I'm like, I have more to say about this, and then I get distracted by something else and I never come back to that topic. I know that I'm bad for that. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to apologize. But I do recognize that it's a problem. And I feel a little guilty about it, so, you know, this is what happens when I go off script. I shouldn't do that. The YouTube algorithm is kind of shit. It is. But it at least provides us with the opportunity to practice what it is like to challenge systems and how they affect our thinking. And I know this is really small scale, that might sound a little bit silly, but YouTube is a capitalist machine. It favors certain approaches, it favors certain appearances, it is about making money. And so we need to ask ourselves how, within this particular thing, we can uplift each other, how we can diversify our viewing habits, and ways that we can retrain our algorithms so that we can see more people who need to be seen and need to be heard. Because you can do it. You can retrain your algorithm. Trust me, like, you start subscribing to certain channels and you're gonna get more and more small queer creators just popping up in your feed. But you gotta consume consciously. We all do. So I hope this helped give you some idea of where to start. I'm gonna call it there with a belated dog bless you to all of my returning swolemates in particular. Thank you for sticking around, even though I was kind of on hiatus for a while there. School was schooling real hard, but I am back in the saddle and I am back to creation. So hopefully I will be seeing you again soon. And as always, thanks for watching. If you're still watching, you should see a list of the people who make my YouTube channel possible. I want to give an extra special thanks to my patrons for sticking with me while I was taking a break to work on my courses. If you would like to be one of these fabulous people, you can find a link to my Patreon in the description. But either way, please like, comment, subscribe, and share the video if you got something out of it. I also know this one wasn't as polished as my usual content, so I appreciate the patience while I shake off the cobwebs. I really just needed to say my piece and get something out there. Much of this was unscripted because I kept getting fired up and kind of ranting about various things associated with this, so I really hope the core messages came through, and please know there was a lot I decided to cut out, both to stay on topic and because I didn't really think it was my place to talk about certain things. Okay, that's it. Much love, and I will see you again soon. For real this time.